It was obviously the money, it was obviously the adventure. But to sail the Atlantic to the Caribbean islands and things, I don't know, perhaps it was the rush of doing something bad.
Cocaine. The magic word had been spoken.
If I'd have known what Frank was going to do, I would have never gone on that boat.
It was the beginning of a nightmare. A nightmare which has continued ever since. So I was brought up on an island on the west coast of Scotland, and naturally anyone brought up on an island is used to be the sea and boats. And the sea always has fascinated me. I had for 15 years been a sail training skipper. Quite naturally, the work in sailing tails off very dramatically as the winter months approach. I could manage in October, I could manage in November, but I couldn't see clearly how the books were going to balance in January, February, March. I think looking back on that early winter of 1999, I was in a state of depression. It was very unusual. The line was poor, and it wasn't a voice that was familiar to me. A person, let's call him Frank, he said, "Dennis and I are here in the Mediterranean." I think I had met Dennis and Frank about 18 months before that. When I first met Dennis, he always struck me as a very warm, friendly kind of person. Frank had always struck me as a slightly colder fish. I would call them acquaintances rather than friends.
And what we said to him was, look, we need somebody to teach us how to sail. We've got a delivery job.
He said, "Are you working just now?"
You can either come out and teach us to sail, or you can come and do delivery, whatever.
They were willing to offer £1,000.
Just get us out at Marina, please, you know.
Took probably about 30 seconds hesitation before I said, "Yes." Dennis was pleased to see me. Now there was somebody who knew about these strange sailing boats.
I don't like it. I just don't like the boat.
Their knowledge of this subject was sadly lacking.
It had sails on and stuff like that. I don't understand that. I just wasn't happy on the thing.
Basically, within 30 seconds of my arrival on the deck, I let out a screech of horror.
Donald was freaking. He was saying, "Oh no, look, you've got," I don't know what they call them, but the mast was about to fall down.
It could have very easily all ended in tragedy.
"Oh, what are you doing, you know? So that's why you're here."
Frank came on board.
And we set off to Malta.
There was a considerable amount of enthusiasm on that first day.
This guy knew what he was doing, you know. This guy's good.
I actually thought this is going to work. But Fairly quickly after leaving the island, various things about the whole attitude to the trip that made me think that the sailing was not the primary objective of the exercise.
I mean, you can't teach a monkey how to play chess, can you?
The suspicions had been growing. There was something about the whole approach that made me think that there was something perhaps a little dodgy about the entire enterprise. Frank began to make noises about what would you do if you could get a really nice sum of money. And this began to ring alarm bells. The weather began to deteriorate as we were approaching Malta. By that time, the enthusiasm was rapidly failing. Certainly for Frank, who just happened to be on the helm at the time. Frank became a little bit upset about being thrown around.
The weather was bad, so what could we do? I think he wanted Donald to pick the boat up and carry it.
He was beside himself, suggested that I really needed to do something about this motion because if I didn't, he would throw me over the side. Doubts began to creep into my mind then. Why did you buy a sailing boat? What was the purpose of this boat?
I think it had a good idea that there's something going wrong here, you know, there's something out of order.
He began to say, have you realised that we're not just wanting to learn to sail? We've actually got something naughty planned here. We intend to take the boat across the Atlantic and to pick up a consignment of drugs. Cocaine. He said that I would be paid £40,000. I had visions of large squads of police scurrying about and armed drug dealers in South America. He said, you are now party to information that let's face it, is extremely dangerous. Should I do something that caused this operation to be blown? Should I cross this operation? Then there was no place in the world to hide. The decision had to be yes. It was the beginning of a nightmare, a nightmare which has continued ever since.
The plan. The plan.
My involvement was purely to skipper the boat,
Sail it out in the Mediterranean, go down to the Caribbean,
and then enjoy myself in the sun. I would have no involvement whatsoever in the handling of the drugs.
and then get the phone call and go and pick up the drugs.
This well-oiled machine would be put in place.
Payday, bye-bye, see you later.
Straightforward, no problem at all.
Slick, yeah. Super slick.
We finally lost sight of the islands just as the sun was going down that evening. I think then the realization kind of sunk into the guys that this was the last time they would see land for anything up to a month. Almost from that point on, there's no going back. It was just really a growing sense of impending doom. Dennis was aware of the clash of personalities between Frank and I. Frank had a great deal of underlying aggression.
I weren't happy. I didn't want to be on board at breakfast because there was just like a bad atmosphere, you know.
It must have made things very difficult for him, but he tried to remain neutral.
Frank and I are old friends. We're old friends. I'd have done anything for him and I think he'd have done anything for me. It was a normal day. I was working. Up pops Frank. are you doing? I haven't seen you for a while, what's going on? Do you fancy coming sailing here? Straight out of the blue. You know, he offered me £40,000. £40,000 cash in your hands is a lot of money. But he could have offered me a bag of chips, I think I'd have gone, you know what I mean? He was a good mate, and a good mate, you know. But what happens on a boat, you get into like a routine. You work 4 hours, you sleep 8 hours. After the first night I couldn't get it, I just couldn't work out what was happening here, you know, my head was going in bits.
They really felt this trip was just going to be an endless nightmare of feeling absolutely exhausted all the time.
We got seasick, we got sick of the sea. The scenery was, you know, the same. You couldn't play I Spy or anything because it was I Spy with my look like something with B. Well, that's boat, SSC and cloud, you know what I mean? That was it.
Just really resigned to getting on, getting over there and getting done with it. We really kept the whole thing under wraps, if you like. Once land was sighted, as a sailor, there's a sense of quiet satisfaction.
I remember being happy. I remember being sat on the boat thinking, wow, that's all right, you know what I mean? There's land at last, you know what I mean? Go and have a shower.
I think Frank and Dennis felt quite proud of themselves that they had survived this endurance exercise.
Got to Antigua, one piece. I think we did it in 23 days.
Seem to remember Frank saying, yeah, you know, well done, skipper, yeah, you've brought us across here.
Just as we're going to the marina, comes in this aeroplane, Lufthansa, the German. My mate looks up and says, "That's good timing." He said, "I couldn't have done that any better." Couldn't have done what? What girlfriend's on that? What girlfriend? Oh, German bird. Off he goes, like 20 seconds after landing. Off he goes, with what money we had, and goes to an hotel with his bird. When he went off with his missus, we had to give him every single penny we had. Everything.
Dennis was becoming less and less confident in the whole operation.
I think he did 2 weeks 5-star in his big luxury hotel. We didn't even get a sniff, you know what I mean? We've got no food. Well, there's us going for like 20 or 30 million pound worth of drugs and we had no food on the boat, you know?
I certainly was making noises. Was there some way that we could bring this to an end? Did we have to continue with this nightmare? He said, were I to run away from this situation, or to attempt to, that had only one conclusion: my death. As we were sailing to Margarita, Frank announced that we would need to make preparations for the drugs. He had made it clear from the beginning that it was a sizable quantity.
Oh dear, like where are we going to put the stuff, you know what I mean? You can't just put it like behind cushions, can you?
There were some 5 internal water tanks.
We just threw them overboard. We drained a diesel tank, then we could actually take the diesel tank out. We could put the stuff below the diesel tank, put the diesel tank on top. That was our preparation.
Probably the last water tank was jettisoned when we had the coast of Margarita in sight, and after that we anchored in Port Lamar Bay.
What a dump. Absolute dump. Just horrible, horrible place. And that was just first impressions. We later found out that it really was horrible, you know, it wasn't just first impressions. So we actually moved out into a hotel, I think, the first day.
For me, it was extremely strange behaviour and very unusual for cruising yachtsmen to be leaving the boat as soon as it got into harbour and heading off to live in a hotel. This was unusual, attention-grabbing behaviour.
We were promised we'd get a 2-day turnaround. My mum went away to make the phone calls, come back, right, couple of days, sorted, we'll be away, sound.
We then really went into a waiting mode.
I mean, we started getting nervous because the lies started coming.
We began to run into weeks.
That's gone from him being my mate who I'd always welcome at my house, which I have welcomed at my house, and helped him when he was stuck, to absolutely not wanting him within a million miles of me. So it got pretty bad. We've been there a long time. I think after about 5 weeks, my mate says, "I have a drama, and a real drama. My wife's got cancer in her breast."
There was huge sympathy for the situation that Frank told us he found himself in.
Donald lost his dad through cancer, I lost my mum through cancer. We know what it is, you know. I mean, what would anybody do? Get on your way, get out of Margarita, go home.
That of course he should go back to Britain.
We actually paid for his tickets and all that rubbish. It cost a fair few quid to get him out of the country. Gone.
I really had a fairly clear idea that was the last time that I would ever see Frank.
It turns out there's nothing wrong with his wife, you know what I mean? Just not wrong with her. She was right as rain. What we were doing, we were actually waiting for a phone call. Just wait for the phone call. Do what the phone call says. Nothing else. I'd sort of got the feeling that we're being watched. But I don't know if we're out of paranoia. I was pretty sure that we were being watched. We had a funny feeling that, yeah, something was going wrong.
At the beginning of May, the phone finally rang.
And he said, "Can you please put the car on this certain car park? Do you know where it is?" Yep. So I drove away, put the car on the car park, put the keys on top of the wheel, which you got to do a bit, you know what I mean, a bit James Bond, like.
24 hours later, it would be ready for collection at the same point with the drug on board. The same process would be repeated during the following 24 hours. At that point, there was a sense of increasing dread, really, that this was the crunch.
It's becoming real, yeah?
There were many times when I thought about just cutting loose and trying to get away, but each time I was brought short by the realization that if I escape today and a week later these lads are in prison, they are going to think we are in prison because the guy that left us last week has talked.
If this comes off, we're Supermen. That night, once I'd actually dropped the car off, I mean, it just wasn't a happy night, you know. I think, I don't remember if I don't think I slept.
I didn't sleep a great deal that night, no. There was a constant sense of dread.
Do you run away? And if you run away, it's your fault it's gone wrong. Where do you run to?
This might be the last night of freedom.
I think that night is when I really realised that what a disaster it was going to be for my family.
I just couldn't begin to imagine just what my daughter's reaction would be, what effect it would have on her life. Whichever direction I looked, there were problems or darkness.
I didn't have enough money to fly out. I didn't have enough airfare to fly away.
Have you lost your mind? What is going on here? What are you doing?
So where am I going to run to? I'm just going to do it. Just going to do it.
When I looked in the back, I just shook my head.
We've been told it'd be bagged, it'd be boxed, it'd be something, but it'd be not obviously what it was, you know.
Because the bags were open weave, you could see that each bag was filled with blocks of a white substance.
They had a big ace of clubs on. You could see them through windows, you know. And unless you were a right turd, you'd know what were in it, you know what I mean? It was so obvious, through windows. Been promised to be tidy, you know, we could carry it off and people weren't going to go, oh, look what they're doing, you know. You could see everything what was going on, and it was just stacked everywhere, it was everywhere, man.
I said to Dennis, look, why don't we just take this down the main street of Porlamar and hand it out the windows to passers-by until somebody comes along and stops us, because to all intents and purposes, that's what's going to happen anyway. This is just crazy.
Donald then decides he wants to pay another day's marina fees. God knows why.
I went into the harbour office, and one thing that did catch my attention when I was there was that there was a strange-looking radio. It was a VHF radio, but it was not a marine VHF radio.
On my own driving back, it was, you know, this is it now.
While the forms were being filled in and I was paying the money, which would have been around the time that Dennis arrived with the car in front of the boat, the radio began to jabber something in Spanish in fairly excited voice.
I think if they'd have weighed £1 million each, or a ton each, they'd have gone on that boat. You know, I just wanted to get them on boat, so they were going on.
The glance that the official gave me as he turned the radio down kind of raised some alarm bells, but I just put it down to a sense of paranoia on my part. Each bag was quite heavy. It held about 25 kilos of cocaine. It was quite heavy work, really.
The carrying of the bags onto the boat was a real slick operation. Just yogging them on the boat, you know what I mean, just chucking them.
As part of the master strategy to avoid police detection, it had been felt necessary and instructed from Frank's end that when handling this cargo we should wear wonderful pink kitchen gloves.
All the rubber gloves helped immensely, yeah, you know. They made us look like a right couple of idiots, and that's it, they didn't help at all. The surprise was how actually big it was.
Into each compartment we stuffed basically as much as that compartment was physically able to take. There was very little space left over, very, very little space.
We're full, you know what I mean? That's it, I got no more room. We're full.
When I realised that the boat was full, or that at least the hiding places were full, then I thought, well, fine, you know, just let's pile whatever comes along on board, and if it fills up the accommodation spaces and we have to actually carry it on deck outside, let's go ahead and do it. You know, this is just a nonsense. It's crazy. It's an absolute Keystone Cops type of stupidity. The next priority was return the car in order for the next consignment to be picked up. Once Dennis had gone off, then I sat there and just wondered, you know, here's another fine mess you've got yourself into. You know, I thought, what am I doing here? How has this come about? This is so crazy.
I was a bit more optimistic than Donald about that it would actually work still. Perhaps thinking, you know, we've got half of it on and nobody's come. Is there a chance, you know?
Once Dennis came back, we just looked at each other and said, do you fancy a pint? Yeah. Right, let's go ashore and have a beer. There was no point in sitting there babysitting 300 kilograms of cocaine. Let's have a beer in the meantime. And if someone came and decided to help themselves to 300 kilograms of cocaine, as far as I was concerned, they were more than welcome to it, and they could take the boat as well if they wished. It seemed a very, very long time ago and almost a world away since that phone call had come to me in Hartlepool. It was quite amazing as where we now were. We suddenly became aware of vehicles. The first vehicle was immediately followed by another one, and then another, and then a larger vehicle. I shook hands with Dennis and said, basically, it's been nice knowing you.
That was the frightening bit, I think. When you see guys in combat uniform, not so much the guns, but the combat uniform, you think, oh no.
It's now happening. That's it. The first vehicle stopped and the window was rolled down, and a person in civilian clothes asked, "Are you from the yacht Pulse?" We said, yes, we are.
Do you know why I'm stopping you? No, we don't know why you're stopping us, you know. Why? He said, you know. So I've turned round and we'll go back.
The convoy then began to drive at walking pace back round the marina towards the boat.
So we get on the boat, me and Donald, and I think about 6 or 7 of these National Guard, the big rifles and that, you know. They just pulled the boat apart. They're saying, where is it, we're going to smash the boat up. Well, we don't know where it is, do we? Where's what, you know what I mean? And I think it took them 3 seconds or something like that, 4 seconds to find the first packet, you know.
We have found cocaine on this vessel and you're therefore under arrest.
And that's when they took us off the boat and handcuffed us.
That was not a pleasant feeling.
It was finished. It was like, right, let's move on to another chapter.
As we drove away, one of the troops looked at me and he said, I feel very sorry you 24 years prison. It's like a fist in the stomach. I had a fairly clear sense that I would most likely die in the prison.
I think I started thinking about my family and Burnley, and I knew I was going to get through it, but I weren't right sure about my dad, and I weren't right sure about my sister and my brother, you know, what have I done to them? And that's really, you know, I thought, whoa, you know, I've destroyed these people, and I did.
A sense of unreality creeps into the situation. It's almost like watching it from the outside, watching a movie.
They came in broken English, he said, if you behave, we'll behave. If you don't behave, we won't behave. If you run away, we'll shoot you. But we won't shoot you in the leg. We'll not hurt you. You'll be shot.
That was the first time that one heard the sound of a prison door closing, and yeah, that's a sound that has a special significance of freedom. Freedom is gone. Your life most assuredly had changed forever.
When we was arrested at the beginning, I got a chance to write to my father. I don't know if I said I was sorry.
I was very conscious of the possible effects that this would have on my family, and you know, especially my daughter. These were the most difficult letters that I had ever had to write. It was devastating to think of what she was going to go through as a result of receiving this news.
Six weeks into it, they took us to court, and the interpreter said to us, right, are you pleading guilty?
We had been there almost up to our knees, literally, in cocaine, and there was no doubt that the prosecution had a very strong case against us.
We never thought we'd get on. I never thought I'd see my dad again, you know. If you plead guilty, then what they do, they give you a third off. We stood up. Yes, we declare we are guilty and we admit culpability, and they took us away then. And after a good while, I don't know how long, a good while, They said, right, we've sentenced you to 10 years, but what we're going to do, we'll give you a third off, 6 years, 8 months.
To hear the words spoken, it's a real shock. I realised that I was going to miss my daughter's teenage years. The next time I saw her, she would be an adult. My daughter maintained communication up until the end of the year 2000. The way that news was being presented back home made it really impossible for her to be anything other than extremely angry and let down. So there was a real sense that now we were going to meet the real side of a Venezuelan prison. This would be the last time that we were able to gaze on everyday life. We didn't see the compound of San Antonio until we were almost on top of it.
We heard gunfire when we opened the door. And I went, oh shit, like, here we go.
We saw a European passing. He was a very tall and extremely emaciated Danish person, as we discovered, who approached the bars when he saw that there were Europeans there and said, "Good afternoon, welcome to hell."
It wasn't hell, it was like 3 floors below.
It was so very, very dangerous for every human being who was in that prison. There was a bit of a war going on between the two parts of the prison. Really, there are no words to describe the utter horror and ruthlessness with which we were obliged to live in that place.
They had like an armed guard on roof to keep the other side of the prison from invading us, you know. And the people on the guns were prisoners. And they didn't have homemade guns, they had guns. They had Brownings, they had Smith & Wessons, they had a SIG 9mm automatic.
The guns were under control. They were used to protect the people of that compound. But each prisoner carried his own knife, usually 6 inches to a foot long and absolutely evil looking.
People got shot, stabbed, killed, every day, you know.
That cold brutality.
They strangled a friend of mine right in front of me.
They then sewed up his mouth and hung him from the inside of a window.
Without Donald, I wouldn't be here. I think if not, I'd have probably hit somebody and getting shot or something like that. That's what would have happened in Margarita. I'd have belted somebody, gone nuts, and somebody had shot me. You know, I believe that. I weren't coming out there, you know what I mean? I've done all my life. No more. I mean, what more can you owe anybody, you know?
We were literally fighting for our lives.
The third month, it got bad, you know, got real bad. There were shots going off, there was people in just little holes, you know, and you think, oh, and there's blood everywhere, and really, blood everywhere.
The whole prison was so incredibly tense. Everyone just waiting and ready for the next group of people to be killed. The war between the two sides escalated. Prisoners broke out through the outside wall of their building on the other side of the prison. Then managed to get up onto the roof and managed to throw a grenade through the windows of one of the cells.
And then you think, this is my life, innit? You know what I mean? And you really know that you're not just locked up, you're just in this shit, you know what I mean?
Everything was so alien to anything I had ever experienced before.
And all right, I needed to pay for my time. I did, you know, and I paid it, and here I am. You know what I mean? Hello, but didn't need to pay for it like that. The day I stepped back in England, just realised how cold it was. It must have hurt my teeth because I was smiling that much, you know, just relief, you know. So I got home and my sister was there and saw my niece that I'd never seen before. She's like 5. So, and then I went for a career. I've changed. I think about everybody else and then me. Before it was just me, you know. What I actually did was just damage my family, and that's wrong, innit? That's wrong.
To move outside these fenced compounds for the first time was just an incredible feeling of relief, release and freedom. The last 6 months has been Chinese torture. I've now had 6 Christmases away from Britain, and away from my family, my friends. To get back for Christmas is the next dream, like coming out of darkness into the light. For me, the saddest part of all of this is my knowledge of the effects that this has had on my daughter at a very vulnerable age in her life. There has not been a day gone by when I haven't thought of that. She is the person who has suffered perhaps more than anyone through this process. But 6 years have passed, and perhaps, I hope, we'll be able to judge with a different perspective, that all is not black and white, good and bad.
What we did was totally and absolutely wrong and stupid and bad, you know, bad. But you know, we are normal people that do things like this. I'm not asking anybody forgiveness. I've paid mine with bells on, you know. So just give us a chance, you know what I mean? Give us a chance.
I regret it deeply and thoroughly. I will regret it for the rest of my life, because it has changed for my life forever. Nothing can ever be the same.